We're sorry to have to tell you, but with wireless radiation, once you get into the area of health and safety, you're going to find it's a complete mess. And this affects all of us. Well, what do we mean? Now, number one, industry tests are not at all representative of how we actually use a phone. Number two, no one knows what the safe levels really are. They're just kind of guessing. And number three, there are some key studies that prove that microwave radiation causes dangerous biological effects. And these reports are being ignored by the authorities and the industry too. And that means that you don't know about them either. Now, we just want to state clearly before we get into this that at Omnia we appreciate our wireless devices and how important they are to modern life, but we must understand how to make them safe to use. We love the companies that provide all the data and technology services, but we have new knowledge which helps us reverse this dangerous situation, which really is spiraling out of control. And we can do this together if we understand the right starting points. But first, if you use any radiating device, you must get your head around this information, because you and your family are being affected right now. This video will cover the following topics: the radiation spectrum. What is radiation? Ionizing and non-ionizing, and does it matter? What are the health and safety standards and who sets them? Exactly how is your safety tested and approved? Is this practice adequate, or is there something missing from the safety tests? The two important controversies about the standards and the way that they're approved. What are the biological reports stating, the tests on rats and mice? Why are these tests being ignored by the phone industry and the health authorities? Omnia's breakthrough knowledge that explains everything, including how you can help yourself. And finally, who can you trust for reliable, independent information? First up, we're going to show you the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, traditionally, this has been the only guideline the science world has used to determine what level of radiation is safe. It shows the range of frequencies, the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation and their respective wavelengths and photon energies. Look from the left to the right, you can see that as the frequencies get higher, from hertz up to gigahertz and beyond, the wavelengths also get shorter, from kilometers down to millimeters. This is representative of more energy being produced in shorter bursts of more power by the electromagnetic source. This effect produces more heat as you go up the scale. The more heat you have, the more danger there is to the human cell, because the human cell doesn't like this heat. So the only thing they know about radiation is that once you get to a certain amount of heat, it damages the human cell. And as you can tell, the key word in this debate is heat. Later on, we're going to be asking, is there something other than heat in a radiation field which is capable of harming the human cell? We think that there is, and we also think that you should know about it. Back to what the industry uses as its benchmark, they only see ionizing radiation, which creates sufficient heat to break chemical compounds or to shake an electron off an atom in mainstream physics, and that comes with a health warning. Or they see non-ionizing radiation, which doesn't create enough heat to break a chemical compound or to shake an electron off an atom, and that is deemed to be safe. And this is a theory that we're going to challenge. Let's go back to the spectrum and look at where we're going from 4G to 5G. In terms of frequency, we're going from about 2.6 gigahertz to 24, and in terms of wavelengths, we're going from centimeters down to millimeters. Specifically, 4G maxes out at 2.6 gigahertz and 5G has a range of frequency bands, the highest of which is 24, but we hear that that can go up to as high as 90 gigahertz. But let's just say in this video that 5G is 9 times as strong as 4G. Now, crucially, later on we're going to be asking, is there any evidence to show that non-ionizing wireless radiation is not safe? And we'll also ask, have any tests been done which show that wireless radiation is toxic to the human body? Remember in video 1 we talked about evolution, the fact that the human body has only been exposed to wireless radiation frequencies in the last 25 years. And we are constantly exposed, not like an X-ray where there's one blast. So the human body is having to adapt to this in real time. And the question here is, has the science world adapted to this social and cultural phenomenon? of touching wireless devices all day long, which transmit massive volumes of radiation. Are the standards set out in this spectrum still appropriate? And are they fit for purpose? We're going to argue in this video that they are not, that they are now out of date. We're going to argue that new standards are required. The main body governing health and safety is ICNIRP, the International Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection. ICNIRP is a subsidiary of the World Health Organization, which listed phone radiation as a possible carcinogen in 2011, before issuing a strange caveat saying, "But so is coffee." Interestingly, there's been no update from the WHO since then, despite a massive amount of lobbying by top scientists and despite a huge spike in global exposure to radiation from phones, but also despite spikes in cancers specific to the areas where we use or keep our phones. Then in the USA you have the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, supposedly an independent body which advises on safety, which had a big role to play in the approving of the safety of 5G. It's advised by the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, but ICNIRP rules on what the safety levels are, and it's produced a standard called the SAR, the Specific Absorption Rate, or the SAR as we're going to call it. ICNIRP describes the SAR as the rate at which energy is absorbed in body tissues measured in watts per kilogram. SAR is the dosimetric measure that has been adopted at frequencies above 100 kilohertz. So the SAR is a measurement of how much energy or heat is absorbed by the human body. And if you didn't know, each phone is given a SAR rating because some phones emit more heat than others. It's just the way that they were built. So here's the table showing the safety standards that have stood since 1996. So you can pause this frame here, but we just want to show you the different standards for the different governing bodies, but we're going to take the 2 watts per kilogram ICNIRP SAR standard as our benchmark. Now, would you agree that a lot has changed since 1996? Well, the SAR measurement hasn't. It stands at 2 watts per kilogram. So now we're going to show you something truly incredible. We're going to show you how they measure SAR. And it's highly controversial for 2 reasons, which we're going to come to a bit later on. So watch this video closely, and here's a little teaser for you. See if you can guess what's missing from this SAR test.
The smartphone in your pocket, the laptop on your desk. How do you know it's safe? Well, the products in your home, the things you already use, many of them were tested out by UL, an independent third party that tests out the gadgets that we have in our lives. We're here with Dave Weaver in the Specific Absorption Rate Laboratory, right?
The SAR Lab, yes.
The SAR Lab, and you are the SAR-czar, is that what I heard you call it?
I run the SAR Lab, so yeah, I am the SAR-czar. Exactly.
All right, so take us through this whole setup you got here. You have some liquid, we have these robotic arms. What are we looking at and what does it do?
Okay, so first of all, SAR is a measurement of how much energy a user of, say, a cell phone is receiving, how much energy is coming into the head or the body. We don't just test phones, it's laptops, cell phones, watches, anything that's got a transmitter in it and is used within 20 centimeters of the body requires this testing by law. And those levels are controlled by FCC, Industry Canada, various government agencies around the world. What we do in here is measure those levels to make sure that the phones meet the requirements. So we've got the robot. We'll come to that in a second. But first of all, we've got SAM. This is Specific Anthropomorphic Mannequin. You can see there's some liquid in here. This is simulating the electrical parameters of tissue in the head.
All right, so what does a liquid have to have inside of it to simulate a human head or the human body?
Depends on the frequency that we're operating at. The very low frequency liquids historically use sugar and salt and water, basically. The high frequency liquids, so above 3 gigahertz, they were oil and water with an emulsifier to make sure they didn't mix together. The modern liquids, they're a chemical called tween, which is mixed with different quantities of water to give us the appropriate parameters for the liquids.
So wait. So we have to stop it right here because this is so important. You've just seen the only test that the industry does to ensure your safety. And have you guessed what's missing from this test yet? That's right, a human being. Or if not a human being, then at least a living, breathing animal. In other industries, for example, like cosmetics, it's normal to test on rats. But here we're being asked to believe that measuring heat absorption, or SAR, in the brain can be simulated by placing some complex oils inside a plastic skin. Now, I'm sure you realise that the human brain is an incredibly well-designed, complex network of electrical signals which run most of the functions in your body. A human brain is not filled with a bunch of oils. It's alive. So that's problem number one. This is not a biological test. And later we're going to show you what some of the biological tests on rats show us, and that's not good news. Now let's continue and we'll see the second point of controversy.
Underneath, there's a phone at the moment. This is transmitting away, which this is what we're testing. The robot arm here is manoeuvring an antenna against the surface of the head on the inside and measuring the electric field strength in the liquid. Once it's completed a scan of the area where the phone is, we can then calculate the specific absorption rate that's being generated by the phone. Right.
So about how many of these tests do you have to run for each device that you are testing?
Typical smartphone with lots of LTE on it, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of tests. And each of these tests takes 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on the frequency that we're testing and the size of the device.
So you're testing for global standards, but there are differences. In the United States, what do we look for in terms of how close a device is to the body and where? And what do you look for in other countries?
Okay, so for manufacturers in the United States, you're going to wear your phone against your body. Most people keep it in their pocket, but you're supposed to wear it in a holster. And the distance of that holster, the separation distance that holster provides, is specified by the manufacturer in their handbook or user guide. So some manufacturers have got a 5mm separation distance, some use 10, some use 15. So you really ought to buy a holster which provides that separation distance if you want to make sure that the SAR is correct level.
Secondly, let's look at the behaviour simulated in this test. They test with the phone 5 to 15mm away from the body and recommend that you use a holster. Is that a guideline that you follow? Because personally, I sometimes make calls with the phone next to my ear and I type by touching my phone. And yet they're telling you to hold it 5 to 15mm away from your body at all times. Now, the reason for this distance specification is that radiation diminishes significantly even at a small distance. It's called the inverse square law. Now, does that worry you? Have you checked the terms and conditions of your phone? And if you did, you might find something like this. And you know what? You've already agreed to these terms and conditions.
So most of us carry our phones in our front pockets or our back pockets, definitely a lot closer than a holster would have it, and definitely close to some very important organs for all of us. Are there any countries that replicate that sort of usage in their testing?
The European Union has recently come out with some new requirements that devices should be tested in accordance with the way they're used.
So did you see how he just admitted that at the SAR lab they don't test according to the way that phones are actually used?
And the European Union has basically said you should never have it any further away than a few millimetres, which is very imprecise, but that's what the wording is in the particular document.
Now let's go over to the guy who exposed this scandal in Europe.
Now we have a new scandal that I want to talk about with you today that is called Forgate. In this short video, you will see how we measure cell phone radiation for the body and brain.
This is a video from 2017 showing how in a SAR test they make sure that a certain distance is observed between the phone and the plastic head. And then you can see what the specifications are for some of the key manufacturers. And Dr. Arazi called this out as negligent because it skews the test results.
But when phones are tested directly next to the body, as when we keep it in your pocket or in your hand, okay? Then they exceed the European test limit, and you can see more than 3 times. For Polaroid Pro, you have 7.42. For an HTC, you have 7.18. And for Apple iPhone 5C, I suppose there is some here, you have 3.11 watt by kilo. So to finish, in June 2016, the new European directive issued to reduce separation distance in testing to a few millimeters, but it's inadequate. However, and it's the most important, we need all cell phones tested at body contact position for all body parts, and testing needs to include children. We are putting all of our children at risk by exposing them to microwave radiation of cell phone that has never been tested for safety. Thank you.
And lastly, just for a bit of fun, let's look at the way that they wrap this video commentary up.
So I think while we don't know for sure, the evidence is increasing that there isn't a problem from cell phones.
Yes.
I'm not concerned, and I let my kids use them, and I use them.
So far, the signs are good. It looks like we're good so far.
But who wears them in a holster?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So the U.S. standard,
I keep mine in a safe place next to my heart.
Yeah, I wouldn't be following that advice. Our conclusion about SAR testing is that we feel it's a flawed test because it goes on the basis that no one touches their phone and it tests on a fake human being. So the next question is, have there been any lab tests done on live animals? Yes, there have. Now guess how many there have been? Maybe 100? Maybe 1,000? There's been 6,000 peer-reviewed studies on harm caused to rats by microwave radiation. And how many of these have you heard about? Not many, right? And the bad news is that these tests show proven links to many serious diseases. So now let's look at the research that shows proven links between microwave radiation and serious diseases. We start with the best list you can find on the web of all the peer-reviewed studies. It's the ehtrust.org website. The Environmental Health Trust, run by Deborah Davis, is a major opponent of wireless radiation and an exposer of the truth. She has some excellent videos on YouTube as well explaining all of this. Go onto their Science tab, click on their research studies, and there you'll find all the major studies categorized into areas of health effects that they've found. So you see we've got the links to cancer, we've got the fertility and reproduction, very important effects, neurotoxic effects, we've got cognition and impaired memory effects, behavioral issues, hearing loss, headaches, sleep, oxidative stress, genotoxic effects on DNA, endocrine system damage, disruptions of heart functioning. You can see that there are many serious diseases because radiation affects all of our cells. Now let's go back to genotoxic effects and just pick out one. And that shows that DNA damage was detected at 0 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours of exposure, and that was in 2009, and exposed to only 1.8 gigahertz of radio frequency, and that's way less than what we're getting on 5G. All the experts agree that the most dangerous effect of microwave radiation is the DNA fragmentation, not just because it affects all the major systems in the human body, but also because it passes the genetic damage silently down to future generations, without us even knowing. Moving on to the Bioinitiative report from 2012, that's the latest version. Now this is the big one. This is a collection of 4,000 studies which show a similarly extensive range of illnesses. And this was championed by medical professors such as Ole Johansson, Cindy Sage and Martin Blank, as well as Henry Lai, who was one of the first canaries in this coal mine, shouting about the dangers of radiation to the brain. You can see here there are lots of effects like genotoxic, you've got effects on gene and protein expression, stress response, immune function effects, effects on neurology and behavior, brain tumors, childhood cancers, breast cancer, you name it. In August 2018, there was a major study published by the Ramazzini Institute of Research in Italy, and in their conclusion, the scientists reported an increase in the incidence of tumours of the brain and heart in RFR-exposed Sprague-Dawley rats. And the National Toxicology Programme also did an extensive study on links to cancer. It found that high exposure to RFR used by cell phones was associated with clear evidence of tumours in the hearts of male rats. And just to reinforce how serious this is, all of these health effects were recorded at levels way below the official SAR limits.
One thing you should also remember is that I mentioned that the official guideline or recommendation is 2 watts per kilogram, but most studies that are showing effects, they are below or very much below or extremely much below this. So this 2 watts per kilogram value is not protecting you at all. And that was found out very early by scientists like myself, that it's just a technical recommendation and nothing else. And here you can see, for instance, the effects on DNA, but also other effects on eating, drinking, calcium, fluxes, the EEG, the electric activity of the brain, and so on. There are so many papers. And if you would like to read a short summary of approximately 4,000 papers, I recommend you to go to the Bioinitiative report, which is on the internet. It's just 4,000 papers. If it should be safe to use these gadgets, all these scientific papers must be wrong. That has never happened in science. The probability for these papers to be wrong is just 0. There is no such probability. And therefore I said, the next resolution we write, because people wanted to write the resolution here, we should publish it in a peer-review-based scientific journal. Then it will be read. And scientists said, no journal would publish such a text. And I said, no, you're wrong. They will. And particularly if we can put some scientific pressure behind it. And we wrote the Benevento resolution. It is published in a scientific journal, and there are a lot of bullet points, and one of them says that arguments that weak electromagnetic fields cannot affect biological systems do not represent the current spectrum of scientific opinion. We said that we need to adopt a framework of guidelines for public and occupational exposure, and it should reflect the precautionary principle. Better to be safe than sorry. We said that we must inform the population of the potential risks.
So to contrast this, let's see an official response from the UK government about radiation risks. In March 2019, there was a petition to launch an independent inquiry into the health and safety risks of 5G. This is the UK government's response when they closed off this petition. Exposure to radio waves has been carefully researched and reviewed. The overall weight of evidence does not suggest devices producing exposures within current guidelines pose a risk to public health. So now here we have to ask, what evidence are they actually looking at? Clearly not the reports that we've just shown you. And we will show you in a simple live blood analysis in the next video that 4G is definitely having an effect on your body. In this situation, we can't stress enough, the only person that's going to look after your body is you. But stick with us and it'll be our pleasure to show you how to do this. So to recap, mainstream science believes that only ionizing radiation is harmful. The phone industry has a SAR test which only tests for thermal effects, meaning heat. They test on a plastic dummy filled with fluids which are supposed to represent the human body. When they test, they hold the phone 5 to 10 millimeters away from the plastic skin, and this doesn't replicate people's normal behavior on a touch phone. There's no biological test done on a living, breathing being, and yet there have been 6,000 peer-reviewed independent biological studies which show that non-ionizing radiation is causing a huge range of diseases. These studies are largely ignored by not only the phone industry but also all official government and health bodies. The official bodies are all making convoluted, disjointed statements about health and safety levels, and we're charging ahead towards 5G as if there's nothing to worry about. And you, the consumer, well, you're left completely in the dark. And as if that wasn't enough, did you know that you're also not insured against any health damage caused by wireless radiation? Insurance companies consider electromagnetic fields to be high risk. EMFs are defined as a pollutant, same as smoke, chemicals and asbestos. Standard policies have clear terms that exclude EMF field exposure from their coverage, meaning you'll need to pay more to add it as a bespoke pollutant cover. This is shown in a statement by a Lloyd's insurance underwriter. The electromagnetic fields exclusion, exclusion 32, is a general insurance exclusion and is applied across the market as standard. The purpose of the exclusion is to exclude cover for illnesses caused by continuous long-term non-ionizing radiation exposure, i.e. through mobile phone usage. This is how crazy the situation is. The insurance companies think it's a risk. The 10,000 peer-reviewed studies on rats show that it's a risk. Even the military knows exactly what this level of radiation can do to the human body, and yet most people are completely unaware. So the question is, do you treat microwave radiation from wireless devices as a pollutant and a risk in your life today? So, what do you think about this situation? Comments below please, or you can send an email if you have any questions. But let's get this conversation started, because it affects every single one of us. Now, we think it's safe to say that this is a very messy situation. And recently, Senator Blumenthal went in front of Congress in the US and found that the budget allocated for safety on 5G was $0.
I believe that Americans deserve to know what the health effects are, not to prejudge what scientific studies may show, and they deserve also a commitment to do the research on outstanding questions. So my question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Perry, how much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? I stress independent research. Is that independent research ongoing? Has any been completed? Where can consumers look for it? And we're talking about research on the biological effects of this new technology.
Thank you, Senator. I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, we rely on the findings of the FDA and others as to the requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
That's zero out of a $17 trillion implementation plan. But Omnia is here to provide some clarity. We think it's safe to say that no one knows for sure why radiation frequencies, which were previously seen as harmless, have now been proven to harm the human cell. Until now, because in the next video, which will be a lot shorter, we're going to show you what Omnia believes to be the real reason why non-ionizing radiation, and in fact any strength of radiation field, will cause imbalance in the human cell. And to give you a clue, it's all about vibration, not heat or energy. So we're going to look at simple tests which show you that microwave radiation is causing imbalance in your body. And we'll introduce you to the ways that you can remove this stress in your life and bring balance back to your body, because that is the Omnia mission. So thanks for watching, and see you in video 3.
Health consequences, but no, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.